probably reading Zephaniah earlier this morning. It's the book that gets read so much. And I want to invite you to turn there, because this is the kind of passage that you got to read over and over again. If you don't know where Zephaniah is, those minor prophets, they're tough. I think that the minor prophets actually, I think they change locations in the middle of the night when nobody's looking. If you don't know where Zephaniah is, it's right after Habakkuk. And if you don't know where Habakkuk is, it's right before Zephaniah. Good as I can do. But like the kids were reading this morning during the Advent lighting, the third Sunday of Advent is kind of this Sunday of joy. But we're reminded during this season that joy is a lot different than happiness. Happiness it's circumstantial. It's based on what's here and now. It's based on emotions. It's very temporary. Joy is something that we can experience no matter what's going on. Even in the saddest of moments, even in the midst of great pain, we can be experiencing joy. And that's good to know while we wait in this in-between time. This time that's after Christ has come, but we're still waiting for him to come again and establish his kingdom in its fullness. And that really makes sense here. It kind of puts things into perspective when we read a passage like Zephaniah, because it's a passage that's literally bursting from the seams with joy. I mean, it's got all kinds of Yuletide cheer here. Let me just read it. Sing, shout. Be glad, rejoice. There's all kind of joy talk here. But this isn't the kind of superficial come and go type of happiness that we oftentimes think about at this time of year. Because quite frankly, the majority of the book of Zephaniah is not a very happy book. I ask you, have you ever damaged a relationship with someone that was really close with you? I don't mean that you just maybe offended somebody. I mean you really damaged the relationship. Maybe a friend or a family member, somebody that you loved. Back when I was a kid, I had this friend, and we were kind of like best buddies. We were really close. He was the kind of friend that when anytime you got free time, you're going to spend with this person. They're there with you through thick and thin. Well, one day, I can't really remember all of the details, but I remember saying something that really set my friend off. And looking back, I think, you were kids and you think, oh, it shouldn't have been that big of a deal. But at the time, I should have known better. However it goes, I really hurt my friend. And I tell you, to this day, it's one of my greatest regrets from my childhood. Because it changed everything. It changed everything about the relationship. So what I had done, essentially, in my actions, I had pushed my friend away. And I remember in this one moment in time thinking, I wish my friend would just hit me. I wish he'd just sock me a good one so that we can get this over with and get back to being buddies. But unfortunately, sometimes we can damage a relationship so severely that kind of fellowship and that kind of intimacy that we had, it's lost. Zephaniah is a book that is about relationship lost. It's about relationship that has been damaged so badly that a separation has been created. For the vast majority of this little book, it's only 3 chapters. You could read it in a couple minutes. The vast majority of this book, you read it and you see there's something really wrong. There's something wrong between the relationship that's supposed to exist between God and the people of God. And it's very simple. It's the same problem that you see all throughout the biblical narrative. Sin. The people have sinned. Same problem every single time. The people sin, and that sin, it creates a separation. What does sin do? What is the nature of sin? It ruins stuff. Think about a bowl of soup. I can't imagine why anybody would want to eat a bowl of soup. You know me. I'm not a soup guy. But for this illustration, I'm going to try to put myself in your shoes because I know I'm in the minority here. If somebody set a bowl of soup down in front of you, I guess for all of you soup eaters, you'd say, yum, I'm going to eat that soup. But what if there was a bug in your soup? What does that do? What does that do to you? You want to dig into it then? I don't know. Some people, they might just take the bug out and then get back into it. Sometimes it seems like we look at sin as though it's just something that gives us a consequence, like punishment, and that's it. That's the whole issue. As long as we take care of that, as long as we take care of the punishment thing, we'll be good. Everything will be okay. But sin complicates everything. It's like a fly in the soup. It taints the whole bowl. It hurts us in so many ways. It hurts those around us in so many ways. See, my sins, a lot of times we like to say my sins are just between me and God. Unfortunately, no. My sins hurt other people. It doesn't just make us guilty, meaning we just need to get the charges dropped and we'll be okay. When I sin against someone, it wounds them. It erodes trust so that we lost what we had. And that's going on. That's exactly what's going on here in Zephaniah. You read through this book and you see it's not just the people of God, Israel, that are going through this either. See, it's all of humanity. You read through the book and he calls out all the nations. We're all in this together because we've all sinned against God. And that's bad news because, like I said, when we sin against someone, it changes the relationship. That doesn't sound very joyful, does it? That pink candle's not looking too good right now. But we look at this passage, the passage that closes the book, that brings the book to some sort of anticipation and conclusion, and we see a passage, a message that defies the power of sin. It defies what sin does. Let's take a look at that passage together. There in chapter 3, verses 14 through 20. While the majority of Zephaniah is written to a people it's telling them that they need to turn because they need a wake-up call, this last portion here in chapter 3, it's written some decades later. After the outcomes have already happened. After the people are already suffering the consequences of their sin. For them, there are people that were living in exile in Babylon. Their nation had been destroyed. Relationship with God was something that they kind of saw as, that's not happening anymore. We've messed up too bad. And when you read this and other writings that are written during the exile, sometimes you get the idea that the people really had a good understanding that they had messed up. That they had messed up so severely that they wondered, is it possible to ever be in a relationship with God again? Have we messed up so badly that this is never going to happen again? See, it would have been easy for them to not only feel like they were far from God, but to feel like he was nowhere to be found. That they were complete castaways, like they were hopeless cases, lost causes. Have you ever felt like that? Have you ever felt like a lost cause? Like what you've done is so bad that you wonder, could God or anybody else really truly love you if they knew what was in your past. Or maybe there are people in your family, people that you love, and your heart just breaks for them. Because while you want wholeness for them and you want a relationship with God for them, you see what kind of a hole they are in. The hole that they've dug in their lives, and you kind of think in the recesses of your mind, this is hopeless. But folks, I want to tell you, like I said, this is a message of joy. This is written in a time that seems like there is no hope, but it is a message of joy. Because what we see here is not a word of hopelessness. It's not a word, it's not a message that things are never going to be better again. Instead, it says, sing, daughter Zion. Shout aloud, Israel. Be glad and rejoice with all your heart, daughter Jerusalem. The Lord has taken away your punishment. He has turned back your enemy. The Lord, the King of Israel, is with you. Never again will you fear any harm. Now, folks, let's chew on that for a second. This entire closing passage is a passage of blessing, but it is blessing a people that don't deserve it. They don't deserve the blessing that God is dishing out. They haven't done anything to remove the sin that sits in between them and God as a barrier. Still, they are being blessed. The punishment's being lifted, so they're called to sing and shout. But get this. The reason for their rejoicing is not just because their punishment's being lifted, but because what they thought was impossible, what they thought was just a foregone conclusion would never happen again, is now happening. That God himself is going to be with them. The relationship that they thought that they had completely ruined and there was no hope of ever having it again, God is repairing it. What seemed to be broken beyond repair, God is putting back together, and he is making all things new. He's going to live amongst them again. And it turns out that he hadn't forgotten about them, quite the contrary. He's coming to be with them in their midst. And that's really good news. Because this people, here in this passage, they represent all of us. This is a story about all of us. This is a message of hope for all of us who have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. This is a message of hope for all who will call on him. Throughout this passage, you see God portrayed in 4 different roles. They talk about him in 4 different images. Some of them are kind of direct and to the point. You know, it comes right out and says, "Your king." Others of them are kind of in between. You got to kind of read in between the lines and see the language that they're using. But at the heart of it all is that he's with us. That relationship is being restored. But this defies human reasoning. Think about it. It defies human reasoning that God would do this. Why would this God of ours, who we have turned our backs on so many times as a human race, why would he put himself back into relationship with people? Why would he do that? But that's exactly what he does. He's a king like no other. You see this verse here. It said that the king is with us and he's going to take away our fear. What kind of king does that? The kind of kings that we're familiar with, they wouldn't act to take away the fears of the people who turn their backs on them. What do the kind of kings that we're familiar with do to somebody who's turned their back on them? They act to destroy those people. don't they? It talks about him as a shepherd who gathers. Look at the language in the end of the passage of these people who are lost, who are lame, who are broken, and he gathers them together. He brings them back home. This is language of a shepherd. What kind of shepherd would do this? To gather this kind of people? Because these people haven't acted like sheep, they've acted like wolves. And they don't deserve the grace that he's giving them. We see God portrayed as a mighty warrior who fights our battles for us. We can have confidence because he's fighting for us. But when you think about it, he's a warrior we should be afraid of because we've betrayed him. We turned our backs on him, but still, he calms our fears. He gives us what we don't deserve. So in a human sense, this doesn't add up. These people who, again, they represent us, they don't deserve what they're being given here. The only thing they deserve is punishment. And yet they receive blessing. They don't even deserve that God would want to have anything to do with them again. Yet he gives his whole self to them. And it's not because of anything that they've done to deserve it, but because of his great grace. That's good news. That's good news because that's us. But folks, I saved the best for last. I told you that sometimes a passage will just come out of nowhere and it will hit you like you've never been hit before. You take a look in verse 17. It says, "The Lord your God is with you, the mighty warrior who saves. He will take great delight in you. In his love, he will no longer rebuke you, but will rejoice over you with singing." And the word in the Hebrew there, it's a loud singing. He's singing at the top of his lungs over you. Did you ever think of God doing that? You know, we sing to God. Did you imagine God singing over you? That's what he's doing. Because he takes great delight in you. In this verse, it's the fourth image that we see of God as a faithful husband. And it's probably the most common illustration of God that we see in the whole Old Testament. As a faithful husband whose spouse has been unfaithful to him. And about this spouse who desires, she deserves nothing but rejection and ridicule, whose sin has worked to push God away. About this spouse, God says, I take great delight in you. You don't deserve anything, but I take great delight in you. I love you. There's this line there. In the translation that I'm reading, that line says, "In his love he will no longer rebuke you." That is one tricky little line in Scripture. If you were to read 10 different versions of the English Bible, you're going to get 10 different translations. Many versions, they'll say something to the effect of, he will be quiet, or he will rest, or he will be silent in his love. However it goes, all the translations have to do with this renewed relationship. But that Hebrew word that makes all the difference, it's a word, charash. It does mean silent. It does mean that God is being quiet, that he is resting. But it's not the kind of silence that we would expect. You see, the kind of silence that this passage is talking about, the kind of silence that charash means, is the kind of silence when you are awestruck by something. When something just takes your breath away. When you look at somebody and you love them so much that you don't know what else to say. The Hebrew poets, they use this word to talk about somebody who is so much in love that it's as though a spell has been cast over them. That's how God feels about you. Our God is enchanted. He is captivated by you. You are his love. And when you read this as it's to be read, I don't believe it is inaccurate or unbiblical to say he is madly in love with you. And he sings songs with loud singing, raucous singing over you. He celebrates you. There is nothing that he desires more than to redeem his lost people. This is a season of joy. Because we get what we don't deserve. He did what we couldn't do, and that's renew a relationship that we had completely messed up. But you see, the joy is not one-sided. God is literally bursting from the seams with joy over you. His love and his longing to redeem and make the objects of his affection whole again is what drives him. The human heart cries out for meaning. You know, I really believe that each of us, we look in the mirror at ourselves, we look in the mirror, we look in our eyes, and we want to know that our lives mean something. We want to know that there is purpose for this life we are living. God makes it possible for us to actually have that. That whether we know it or not, our soul's cry is to be in a relationship with him. But what we see here in this passage is that he is crying out for that very thing even more. That his passion is to be in a relationship with us. His desire is to make us whole again. It is to live with us and to be together with us. And because of that, because he longed to make his people free, he came 2,000 years ago. He was born just like you and me. He became human just like you and I. So that he could sympathize with us, so that he can walk with us in this life, that we wouldn't be separated, even though everything that we had done separates us from him. He removes that barrier on the cross and gives us the opportunity to experience eternal life with him. That we can have this relationship for all time. No matter what's going on in our world right now, no matter what's going on in your life, no matter what brokenness and pain and hurt you are experiencing, you can have joy because you've got a God who is wild about you. He is captivated by you. He looks at you and he just says, "Ah, my child, I love you." I'm going to ask the musicians to please come. And I'm not really sure how you ought to respond to this message. Maybe you want to come and pray at the altar. Maybe you need to have a talk with God. You know, a lot of times we talk in church about a relationship with God. And it's, maybe for some of us, it's not really something that we've ever experienced before. Maybe that's something that you need to come and share with them. Say, "God, I want you to be real in my life. I've talked a lot about relationship with you. I want to experience that relationship with you." Maybe for some of us, there's a barrier that's pushing God out. And we need to lay that down. Maybe for some of us, we just need to rest in his love today and be reminded that he loves us with a love that we can't even comprehend. And that love, it came 2,000 years ago in the form of a little baby. Won't you stand?